I'm Dr. John LaPook. I'm the chief medical correspondent for CBS News, so I do 60 Minutes, Sunday morning, evening news, morning news. I'm also a professor of medicine at NYU Langone, and I started something called the Empathy Project. We make Hollywood-quality short films that teach clinicians and training, clinicians and others, to be more empathic and sensitive, and to, as importantly, empower patients and others to demand that. And if you go to empathyproject.com, you'll see stuff we do. My crew is going, yeah, plug. Empathy, not empathy.com, empathyproject.com. What we're going to do is we're going to have everybody, Zoanne, Marty, and Lisa are going to introduce themselves. Then it comes back to me. Then I'm going to tell you the theme for today. And then off to the races we go. So, Zoanne.
Hello, I'm Zoanne Clack, and I am a writer-producer for Grey's Anatomy currently. So I started my life as an emergency medicine physician, trained at Emory, did my residency there, and then had a life change in my Jesus year, and moved to LA and started doing the writing thing. But I should say before that, I also got a master's in public health at Emory, and I was just kind of looking for my niche thing, and apparently this is it because I've been on Grey's Anatomy for 22 seasons.
Yeah, all right.
Anytime you want to interrupt with applause, go for it. I'm Marty Kaplan, and my career was scheduled by a drunken sailor. I started out in molecular biology. I then went on to literary theory, and then became a White House speechwriter, and then I became a vice president of Disney, and then a screenwriter for Disney, and now I hold the Norman Lear Chair in Entertainment, Media, and Society at the USC Annenberg School for Communication, where I launched and now direct the Norman Lear Center, which maybe, if John wants to hear about it, we can talk about.
Right. The reason why I said that is, in full disclosure, Norman was my father-in-law. So I was going to tell you that anyway. And by the way, this was supposed to be a surprise, but I might as well tell you now. We have the drunken sailor in the back. Please, Adam, would you stand up? Sorry. That was a joke. There's no drunken.
I'm Lisa D'Amour. I'm a psychologist. I take care of teenagers and their families. Zoanne, I want to thank you. I do a lot of work with adolescent girls, and if you had to rank their coping mechanisms, Grey's, as they call it, is the #1, and everything after that is very far down the list. So I suspect you know this, that you are responsible for the mental health of many hundreds of thousands of adolescent
We
girls.
actually take that responsibility very
Appreciate
seriously.
it very much.
Yes.
And the reason I have the honor of being on this panel is that I spent 4 years working on Inside Out 2. It was fun. It was really fun.
So, what's the expression? We brought the receipts?
Oh.
I mean, I hear that's an expression, right?
I hear,
show,
yeah.
Some show.
The young people.
The young
Yes.
people.
Yes.
All right, the theme for today is, there's been health in TV, portrayed in TV as long as there's been TVs. I remember Ben Casey and Dr. Kildare all the way up through, ER and of course Grey's Anatomy, and now The Pit. And I remember when I was a kid, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, if you saw something on TV, it was true. You just believed it. Things have changed, and I think the theme for today, because we were saying, they could be here for 4 hours telling you great stories, and you would absolutely be entertained. But what is something where tomorrow you're going to say, you know what I learned that was not intuitively obvious, and whatever. And so we thought of, what is the filter that people need these days to be able to figure out whether what they're seeing in terms of health being portrayed on television and other media is accurate. So with that, I'm going to turn to Marty, who's going to pitch to a clip. Go for it.
So I have a project at the Norman Lear Center called Hollywood Health and Society. And our main goal is accuracy in screenwriting for health issues, and the way we get to do that is not by telling writers to do, but by inspiring them. And a way to inspire them is to show them the power they have. And that when they realize their power, as you just did with Zoanne, then wield it responsibly. It's easier to do that when you know how real it is. So to demonstrate that, I would like in a moment to roll a clip from Grey's Anatomy.
Talk about your coincidences.
And as you watch it, I'd like you to think about a couple of things. One is, imagine you were watching that clip in an audience, a television viewer. How would you feel? What would you learn? What might you believe? What might you do as a consequence of a 60-second clip? I also want to tell you the context. That clip was shown at an awards ceremony, a red carpet gala, which we, the Lear Center, have every year to honor those shows that manage to be both accurate and entertaining. And so that clip was shown at that event, and afterward you will see a conversation briefly between the writers of that show. Roll clip, please.
My doctor at home is not the best. Maggie tells me you are.
Well, that's very nice of her, thank you.
Can you get rid of this?
Well, let me take a look here.
That's not a great look.
Well, Diane, our initial biopsy results, they show inflammatory breast cancer. We need to confirm, but...
Breast cancer? But there are no lumps.
I understand. It's a particularly aggressive form of cancer that presents as external skin reactions more often than lumps.
Oh, dear God.
I'm so sorry.
But when you tell a story about it and people are into it and people know your characters, the change in their mental viewing of it, the change in how they feel about it is significant as compared to just a news story. So.
You're right. It feels like it's happening to a friend rather than just happening to a fictional character that you read about or watched on TV. It feels like it's happening to someone you've had over every week.
Every
So
week in your house.
Like it's happening to you.
And we received a letter about a woman who had seen 2 doctors about a rash on her breast and been told by both of them that they were probably some sort of inflammation and that they would go away. And then she watched our program and she decided to get a 3rd opinion. And that 3rd doctor diagnosed her inflammatory breast cancer in time for her to be treated by chemotherapy, and now her prognosis is very good.
So being accurate can save a life. That's the bottom line as an incentive. And if writers know that they have that kind of power, our bet on the writing community is that they will wield it responsibly.
All right, so in this clip, we all knew that there was an important moment because there was a close-up and the music changed. And
And it was Samuel L. Jackson's wife.
yes, it was, LaTanya Richardson
That's
Jackson.
right.
Thank you very much. Who is in one of our videos. She is in The Elephant in the Waiting Room, which is about implicit bias, a little animation. We never met before, right? This was not a setup. What I tell the medical students is exactly that. You see a movie, you know, there's a scary moment, there's a close-up, the music changes. But in life, there's no close-up, there's no change in the music. You have to have the soundtrack in your head, and you have to have the zoom lens in your eyes. So I ask you, and let's start with you, Zoanne. How do you have that soundtrack, and how has this all the years that you've been doing this inform that soundtrack and that zoom lens in your eyes? Because I think that's something and how do you know when to believe that?
Well, I mean, like I said, we've always taken that power very, we've tried always to be responsible in the whole 20 years.
Yeah.
And, my public health background, in addition to, I didn't say that in college I was a communication studies major with a neurobiology minor, like you do. And then my MPH was in behavioral studies, behavioral sciences. And then, of course, I had the MD. So you kind of bring all of those together, and it adds up to entertainment education, which was kind of a fluke. I totally did not plan that in any way. But it was so amazing to be able to speak to 20 million people with everything that we were saying. And because we were speaking to 20 million people, we were like, we have to know what we're saying is in the basis of accuracy and being correct. And also, in this day and age, which again has evolved over the 20 years that we've been on, you can click on the internet and find out if the whole story you just got told has no basis in reality, which just nullifies basically everything that you just went through. Authenticity is so important in reaching people, in getting them just for the entertainment of it all, which is what we focus on first, I should say that. But to draw them in and to feel like you've been duped, just really takes that away. So we always start in that basis of authenticity. And we know that 14-year-old girls are finding us all of the time. They find us on Netflix. They catch up to 450 episodes, and then they watch us in real time. And I know 450 because I'm writing the 450th episode right now.
Oh, my God. So, Lisa, why did you point to Grey's Anatomy as saying that was such an important source of information?
It's not information that the 14-year-old girls are going for. It's the story.
Well, the story which leads to them being
and
informed.
also, I mean, this is a different topic, but, teenagers use television for coping. And a lot of it is actually rewatching. And a lot of it, and the way I've always thought about it is, it's really complicated to be a teenager. Your day goes sideways in ways that you just don't know. And so I think when kids go back to shows and rewatch, they're like, I know exactly where this is headed, and I know where it's landing, and I know how I'm going to feel.
And they go through all those emotions all over again each
but
time.
with predictability this time. And so it's very valuable in that way. But I was thinking about, how do people know what things in my world are true, right? Yours has a medical science, right? And I'll tell you how you know if something's true, if you're watching it and it has to do with psychology or inner worlds, if you're crying, right? If you hit home in that way with people where they are moved, then you know you're on the right track. And one of the things I hear all the time about Inside Out and Inside Out 2 is that the kids are enjoying it. The parents are, whoosh.
Oh my God! When Bing Bong died, don't even talk to me.
Yeah, no,
that was the imaginary elephant.
Beside themselves. And I just want to make a point about parents and kids.
I want to take exception to what you said.
Okay, lay it on.
But no, you go ahead.
Okay.
I just put a pin in that.
So, one of the really interesting findings about educational programming for kids is that it's most effective if the parents want to watch it too. Mm-hmm. Because the kid gets some learning, but a lot of the learning actually happens in subsequent conversations. And so the genius of Inside Out and Inside Out 2 is that adults love to watch it. And what it means then is when the kid is having a hard time, the parent has seen the show, the movie, and then can be like, hey, sadness, remember sadness? So really, actually, where the rubber hits the road on good programming for kids is that their adults want to watch it. And this is why things like Barney only went so far, because adults couldn't stand it.
Bluey, however.
Yeah,
Barney
exactly.
is a dinosaur.
So, crying as a measure of authenticity and accuracy. Storytelling is magic. It can be sorcery. It can be evil. It can be used to manipulate. Storytelling is a tool. In some hands, it can do exactly what you said. In other hands, it can make you cry at the wrong time for the wrong reasons. And so that's the power of the storyteller. You can be on the side of education, you also can be on the other side.
My boss used to have a, not Shonda, another boss, a little plaque that said storytellers could rule the world, or can rule the world, which, you know, is a little self-aggrandizing, but a little bit true.
Or could ruin.
It also gets at something that, you know, sort of underpins all of this, which is people learn through story, right? That you could have that same information transmitted in just a dry, you know, little 3x3 about this is what breast cancer looks like sometimes. You'll see it, you'll forget it. Like, you'll never forget that.
Don Hewitt started 60 Minutes with 4 words. Tell me a story.
Yeah.
All these years later, that's the mantra. Tell me a story.
And I feel like also for Grey's Anatomy and a lot of other shows, it's kind of the Albert Bandura social learning theory, where people connect with the characters and feel that they are their friends, and we have to remember that they're learning by observation and modeling. So if our characters are thinking or saying something in one way, then often the audience will follow suit because these are their friends.
So you mentioned the phrase entertainment education, which is a term of art. There is actually a field which you were a student of and now a master of, in which people learn how to address social problems all over the world. It was a bigger field outside the US before it became here, because in other countries, there's usually a state-run production house, network, and studio. So if they decide that they want to solve, say, HIV/AIDS by making sure people know how to prevent it, they create TV shows to tell stories to move that policy. Some people might call that propaganda. In this case, it's propaganda with a pro-social purpose.
I've actually trained some of those people. Like, they'll pick out some of the locals to be writers who are not writers. So I used to go in and kind of teach them just the basics of writing and teach them how to kind of hide the message, you know, just how to make sure that they have the drive, they have the authenticity, and they have the story that sucks people in, and then they're slipping in the messages without preaching to people.
You know, I wasn't going to tell this, but it's so relevant that I will tell it, which is that, so Norman, my father-in-law, died in December 5th, 2023. And a couple of months before, I showed him ChatGPT. And I asked ChatGPT, write an episode of Mary Hartman from the perspective of a housewife in 2023. And a couple of seconds. And I read it to him. At first, he was confused. It was like, was this an episode that exists? And I said, no, this is ChatGPT. And then when he got that, he said, oh, you know, this is something that a young writer might write, where we would take it, we would sort of buff it up. It's amazing, but it's also frightening. And I said, well, why is it frightening to you? He said, well, imagine, I trust what I want to say, my message, but imagine somebody with a message that's terrible, who can whip something up that's super entertaining, that could really do some damage. So that gets us back to the audience tomorrow, telling their friends, what did you learn that can make you see, like, oh, wait, that's a clue. Do they have to, like in your case, you look at your credentials and you go, oh my God, I'm going to believe anything inside out too. Do people have to, people aren't going to do that. No. When they're watching television, they assume whatever they assume. So are there any clues that, you know, any tells, like in poker, you know, right? If you're bluffing, yeah, he pulls his earlobe, he's bluffing, you know, he scratches his chin, he's bluffing. Are there tells to a medical show that would should sound an alarm?
Oh, you're asking me.
Anybody. But you've written 22 years worth, so. I mean, Grey's Anatomy, I have to say, great show. There were things that happened on that I went, what? Those people would be in jail. You know,
what?
The guy who just disconnects the heart-lung machine, so he gets a little further up on the.
You know what's funny about that is
Tremor in the upper
Shonda
degree.
Rhimes
Yeah.
was like, what would happen if we cut the LVAD wire? And I was
That's a
like,
hard
you are
assist device.
crazy. No, you can't. And then I thought about it and I was like, why not? And then what often happens is we'll talk to experts because this is
Whom you get from Hollywood Health and Society.
Right.
but
Just so
That's
you
what
know
we
what they're
do.
talking about.
We
There was
give
a
them-
transplant list. In order to move up higher on the
give them
transplant list,
free
you make the
experts.
person sicker by disconnecting their heart-lung machine.
To move them up
or
on the list.
the left ventricular assist device. Sorry, go ahead.
and it was a finale. Let's also put that into perspective.
Okay.
But so what often
I
happens?
love hearing, this is so great, the behind-the-scenes
Yes.
discussion of this.
So what often happens? So my learning curve the first 3 years of Grey's Anatomy was learning to say yes, because the writers who have zero boundaries. You know, as a physician, I'm like, this is medicine. You know, this is where we can go, and they'll be like, but what about this? But what about this? And I'll be like, that's crazy. And then but I've had to like pull that back, and I say that's crazy in the back of my head, and then I go talk to experts. Then I go call Hollywood Health and Society. They get me experts, and we talk to them. And initially, their usual reaction is, that's crazy. And then we say, well, what if? Could it happen? I know Grey's Anatomy is definitely a 1 in a million case all the time. We always do that. But usually, and oftentimes, we are talking to that 1 in a million person who has done whatever that procedure is. But, you know, we start talking to the physician or the scientist or the researcher, and they start thinking about things, and then they become excited about it, and they're like, well, if you were to do this, you know, because they're not going to see this in their practice, in their real life, and they get really excited about it, and by the end of the call, they're like, when is this going to air? I really want to see how it turns
I
out.
can't remember whether there were negative repercussions to them doing that totally illegal thing.
Yeah.
There were in the...
Well,
in
Vinny
the,
died. Spoiler alert, if you haven't seen season 2 of Grey's Anatomy.
Did the person get
all
in
of
trouble who
the-
disconnected the...
Well, none of the interns would admit who it was, which added to the drama.
Okay, so
because
that's
all
real
of
life.
Them, it was kind of the,
Real life?
you know,
Yeah, I got that.
I Claudius or whatever.
I want to go back to what you said about sneaking the message in. One of the things we know as clinicians is if you hit people over the head, you're going to get a defensive reaction. So you may have gotten your message across, but you don't really land it. And there's a scene early in Inside Out 2 that shares an extraordinarily powerful message about something that's often very, very painful for parents. But it is done with humor, it is done quickly, it is done subtly, and it totally lands. And the scene is, do you remember in Inside Out, the first one, there's all the islands of her main mental activity? Mm-hmm. So right in the opening of Inside Out 2, where the main character Riley has become a teenager, Joy is standing with the emotions, surveying the islands. And there's this island, which is Family Island, which used to be a really big island in the first film when she was 11. And one of the characters is like, where's Family Island? Family Island has receded to the back. It's gray. It's very boring. It has the parents standing like this and Riley standing like that. And it is totally occluded by Friendship Island, which looks like this giant amusement park. Okay, this joke takes 2 seconds. Mm-hmm. It takes 2 seconds and captures on the screen the feelings of sadness and loss and rejection that parents of 13-year-olds are struggling with, that feel deeply personal, enormously painful, and in a 2-second, fabulous, lighthearted visual joke, basically says, this is normal, you are not alone, this is tolerable, if not even a sign of your kid's healthy development. Like, the genius of that kind of writing, right? Like, I could do years, weeks of therapy and not get parents as far down that road as that 2-second gorgeous joke did.
That's like the sadness you said, then identifying that sadness is a thing and envy is a thing and anger is a thing. And what does that do for the kid who's experiencing it?
Well, one of the things that's so challenging around emotions is they're really abstract, right? So it's hard even sometimes for adults to talk about them, much less kids. So, in this, set of films, to make these emotions concrete, color-coded, memorable characters, you now have 4-year-olds who can talk about envy because she's a character, right? Like the achievement of that. But the other thing, what we're saying is, like, in some ways, like, if you make it entertaining and you make it engaging, people will, they'll absorb it, they'll take it in. Again, if we do it dry, if we do it too direct, you won't get it.
It's like they're learning despite not wanting to learn.
Yeah,
They're learning regardless.
It's like a spoonful of sugar, right? Like it makes it go down. Yeah.
So I'm going to be the skunk at this tea party,
Great.
even though I'm
Pee in the pool. Go for it.
even though I'm throwing the party. And that is that when you're watching a show, a regular audience member, you are enthralled, literally, you are enslaved by this story. You have given up control of your reason. Those are actors. That's a script. Those are sets. And you're taking it as if it's a real thing. And that has always been seen as a danger of entertainment. Footnote, Plato in the Republic banishes the poet who was the entertainer of that time, the bard singing Homer, banishes the poet because the poets lie to the audiences. They tell things which are not true. And Plato figured out that education won't make a difference to the audience, that their parents won't make a difference, that the only way to deal with that is to get rid of it, to ban it, which is an example in our time of censorship, age restrictions, and on the other hand, go for it.
So things can feel, get back to that, earlier on in the discussion, things can feel, you said if it makes you cry, things can feel authentic without being accurate. Those are probably the trickiest and most dangerous, right? When you can slip in beautiful information, but you can also slip in subliminally inaccurate information.
Well, and then this gets to the problem of scale, right? Because once you've got this information out, the thing I was most blown away by in the work on Inside Out 2 was just the sheer scale, right? I am making my appointed rounds, trying to get a message out about mental health is not about feeling good, it's about having feelings, to fit what's happening, managing those well, right? I can do this much. That film, which that is an accurate message, and that is the message of the film, it's the highest grossing animated film of all time. People will watch it over and over again. Like, I will never, ever do work again that has as broad an impact as that film. And I'm totally comfortable with that.
You're so young. You never know.
I always say that, when I was working in the emergency department, I could tell 2 patients about diabetes, and then they could tell 2 people, and they could tell 2 people. So maybe 20 people would know about it. But I put it on an episode of Grey's Anatomy, and 20 million people worldwide have received the message. Whether or not they take it in, that's a whole other thing. But even if 10% of those people took it in and took action, then, the impact is, I literally have chills. Just right now. So.
And now think of the social media influencers who have tens of millions of followers, and nothing they say is true. And if you go to the internet to see what the truth is, you'll get another person who is not telling the truth. So the screenwriters have been for generations now the storytellers with the biggest amplifiers. But now it's happening in a way that no one really anticipated and no one is doing anything about. So if you want to fund doing something about that, please see me after.
So in the 10 minutes left before another 10 minutes of Q&A, what about that social media thing? What's your insight there?
Well, the challenge is there are lots of doctors who have great social media sites. There are lots of lay people who are giving terrific advice. They don't have the followership that a lot of the people who are not doing that. I think it's going to be a challenge no matter what, but it's probably easier, relatively speaking, to help the truth tellers get more followers by helping them be better storytellers. So flood the zone with accurate, good stories rather than getting the people who are shilling for products or on an ideological bender to get them to tell the truth.
So, Anne, you were in the writer's room, so I'm especially, for so many years, I'm especially interested in your viewpoint on this. Is it just, you just got to figure out who to listen to and who not to? Or again, I keep going back, and it's interesting, it sounds like there really is no, obviously there's no one thing, but it's very difficult to teach an audience, a lay audience, for example, how to look at whether it's on social media or on TV and say to themselves, here's what I'm looking for to know whether or not to believe it. But I want to hear what Zoanne has to say about this.
Well, it's like you have to take in just like real experiences, right? Like, so we always feel like, we feel like we're on the right side of history when we tell our stories.
Yeah.
And
But
other
you
people
have all
may
these,
not feel like that.
Because you're doing research, you're serious, you take it seriously, you say you can't untell something to millions of people. That's you.
Yeah. But like an example of that is during the COVID season.
Yeah.
Our season 17 was basically our COVID season, and we were telling it during the height of COVID, but a little bit behind. So we could tell it with hindsight of knowing what had just gone on a few months ago and knowing what was going on now. So we were going towards something. And we never told it as, is it right? Is it a virus? Is it an epidemic? Like we told it as a fact from the view of the healthcare workers, as feeling how the healthcare workers were feeling. And I think you were mentioning too, it's just like everyone was having this single solitary experience. And for people to see it portrayed on Grey's, it became a world experience. Like everybody realized that, oh, that's happening to other people too. It's not just me. And a lot of people, poo-poo on the COVID season because who wants to go through that trauma again? But for us, it was like, it's kind of like a time capsule where people can go back and feel what that was like, and for people who didn't go through it to understand like how we talk about it, because we went through it and how it affected us. But again, like we had debates. We try to present both sides. Usually the good side of history wins. But like ivermectin, we never put that up as a serious treatment of things. We had a COVID denier who we debated on whether or not he should die, and he did. But, like Bailey was up in arms about like, and she gave her one of her Bailey speeches about like, I've seen this and I've seen this, and you get that experience and you're getting all these facts through her, just insanity of how can you think this, and so you're feeling it through the way that she is feeling it. You're taking in the facts, but it's not about the facts. It's about the emotion that she's feeling. It's about hitting those beats, and about like, what is the relationship between that patient and this doctor that I love and I've been watching for 17 years. So that is kind of how we go into our storytelling. It's just like we have what we believe is the correct facts from the experts and the research and evidence-based medicine. And then we go from there and we try to present the other side. Like we also had a big reproductive health year when Doe was a lot of abortion stuff. And again, based on facts, based on science, based on evidence that the researchers were doing, is how we told the stories. And we'd have other people come in, and we'd have both sides, but one side clearly was the way we were going with.
That's another clue if you're looking for like the music and the zoom in.
That's
the clue is a fight.
Yes.
When writers need to do exposition,
yeah.
It's so awful if someone just says something and explains it. So you need two people, didn't I say? And when you hear someone doing that, getting into a fight, you know what the writers are doing. They're trying to get you to pay attention to something you might not otherwise sit still for.
Which gets, okay, so then in my world, where it's not such clear, diagnosis and medicine, I mean, it's not, it's more subtle. I think what you want to see is subtlety, right? I think you're going to have a good sense that something's likely to be more true in the psychological universe if there's subtlety, if there's nuance, if it's presented as something that can shift based on context. I think if you come across entertainment that's, in the psychological world, it's like this all the time for everybody, you should run screaming in the other direction from that entertainment. So, to have something that has nuance and complexity in my world means it's going to be more true. But then that gets to the problem with the social media stuff, the stuff that gets a lot of traction, the stuff that people forward and gets sent around tends to be the less subtle stuff, tends to be stuff that has bent towards fear-mongering, tends to be things that are collapsed information. And so the challenge, and I'm somebody who creates content and puts it out on social media that does try to be useful to families around mental health and teenagers, is, there's values I won't compromise, and that also means that my stuff won't get as much traction as something that is fear-mongering and unsubtle.
And if you have a gentle tone of voice, when I'm very big on tone of voice, so did a whole Sunday morning piece about, when babies were born and they go, the first thing they hear is, good morning, how are you? And you learn to trust that, and the opposite's true if you're yelling. And you're going to get a lot more viewers if you're yelling and shouting and jumping up and down. But I think, especially in my role as chief medical correspondent for CBS News, I'm all about, but that is a key thing, is just, no dog in the fight. Here's what I've learned. Let me present it to you in a way that's easy for you to understand.
Well, so then it makes me want to your thing about fights. Is it also something in your world where you can actually use a fight to present something that's not so clear-cut, and that way both sides get onto the table? Is
Yes.
that a...
Oh, that's the whole, I might have been, it's not usually clear-cut during the fight. So, we know what we want to get out of it, but somebody else may not get the same thing out of it.
A Norman moment. When All in the Family first aired, there was a huge controversy on the question, what was called the Archie Bunker effect, that Archie's racism would reinforce people's racism. Norman's response to that was, no, it's a dispute between Rob Reiner and Archie, and that you can recognize in your family both sides of the dispute. But that battle, that question of whether people understand enough not to take after the person who is socially unacceptable to some people, and that is always a challenge because you identify with people. If that's your father doing that, maybe you are willing to forgive and forget.
I have to say, because and we have like a minute and a half before Q&A, but Norman almost quit because, and I want to ask you about censorship, about whether the censors, were a problem for you. There was an episode where Archie needed to come home a little early from church, and Meathead and Gloria are at the top of the stairs coming down. It's clear that they've been having some intimate relationships there, and Archie says, "On a Sunday morning," and the network wanted it off because America doesn't know that people have sex, so don't say it. And he said, "You can cut it, but you can also say goodbye to me." Did you have fights like that? Or did Norman so pave the way?
Oh, no. At the beginning, we had a lot of fights, and Shonda would always fight back, and they were hilarious, the fights back. But there was like one episode where we literally said the word penis like 20 times because Meredith was carrying a hacked-off penis in a cooler for the entire episode.
As one does.
Yeah, it's normal medicine. So she was, and then we had another episode, and they were fine. They were like, okay, say penis all the time. And then we had another episode where we were going to say vagina 3 times. And they were like, oh, you can't say vagina. And it was like, it's a medical show. It is a piece of anatomy. And this is how the JJ came into
Did it start at Gray's, or was it Oprah reacting to it?
100% started at Grace.
Okay, now the truth has been revealed. We have 10 minutes, and I want to go to Q&A because I'm sure you have questions. Why don't we start over here?
Thank you for that interesting talk and all of your perspective. So the field of medicine and new innovation in medicine can move very slowly. And then at the point that new treatments are available, it can also move slowly. And so I'm wondering how you look at and how you tell stories about innovation, and when things start to move quicker in certain lines of medicine, when is it appropriate for entertainment to start telling those stories? And how do you share it to help educate the public that there's new options available, new things that they can do?
Oh, good question.
Oh, well, we have the benefit of being a network show, which still is told in real time. You know, like right now we're starting to film episodes for this season, and we will continue to film throughout the year, whereas the streaming does like all the scripts at once, and then, you know, shoots all at once, and then edits all at once. So 3 years later, they're airing. So, you know, we're filming, you're seeing it this season, so we're able to like incorporate some of those things. I mean, I think it could have gotten us in trouble because there's sometimes where things aren't quite ready for prime time. And we've featured it on the show. Like that one, what is it, Bad Doctor? And it was like something about the trachea. There was some kind of trachea thing where it was this new innovation in surgery, and he had been doing all these things, but then they found out that, you know, everything had gone wrong and all of his patients had died and blah, blah. Okay. And I remember watching that documentary.
There was 3D
or
printing or stem cell making?
Yeah, stem cell.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, did we tell that story like, you know, 10 years ago? And I was like, did we talk to this guy, like that expert guy? And as it turned out, we didn't talk to that particular guy, thank God. But we had told that story, and I wondered if it was, I think it was a teensy bit different because it wasn't that particular guy, but you know, you can get into a little trouble because we don't do a lot of like hot off the press stuff, but we do try to do things like last season, Meredith was doing this Alzheimer's research, and you know, Alzheimer's has been kind of a thing throughout the show, and it was based on some new revelations that Alzheimer's is coming up with, but of course, what's the end game on that? We're not curing Alzheimer's, but we have one of our characters who's doing all this Alzheimer's research. So of course we're going to have to put that in the backside because there's no end game, and we don't know what it's going to show. So so we just try to get little tidbits and that sort of thing as we go along, and try to stay up with what's going on in accurate, you know, evidence-based case studies that have been proven and are not guiding the public into the wrong direction. And of course, we'll only present just a tidbit of it and then let the public do the rest of the research themselves.
It's a little bit of the same challenge we have in network news. Seriously, we do incredible amount of research for 75 seconds of me up there nationally, and we take it super seriously, but sometimes you're a little ahead of the game. You got to say, you know,
you got to pull back a little bit.
This person has a conflict of interest because of such and such, and it's early days and all that stuff, but it's hard to tell a nice, fun story and still say, but it's early days. You know, I can say that on the news. Next question, over here.
Dr. Laporte, thank you for a brilliant moderation as always.
Thank you.
And thank you for the illustration, you know, illustrious panelists. By the way, I wanted you to know that the panel you are competing with is the NIH director.
I know,
yeah.
Dr. Bhattacharya, right.
And I thought everybody will be there, but yet you have a great turnout, so congratulations. You know, I used to think that being a great writer is very difficult. Being a great speech writer is very difficult, beyond my brain width. That's why I chose another career. You alluded to the ChatGPT. How is that going to change the creativity that was there and recognized?
writers are terribly afraid of it. We did a 8-month-long strike because of it, partially because of it. No, it's very frightening.
What do you think, Lisa?
So I won't name names, but my husband and I were watching a show recently, and we were like, it feels like ChatGPT wrote this, because it sucked. It was bad. And so I missed that.
She said, name 'em.
So my hope, so I don't doubt that there will be plenty of ChatGPT created content. But as someone who uses ChatGPT for my own work, it's a first draft. Like what Norman said when you showed it to him, it's a first draft. It can do good. I don't think it can yet do great.
Right.
And so what I think we have to hope for is that we are going to have audiences, not that we didn't finish the show because we were already into it, who are, discerning.
But also, it can hallucinate. We all know that ChatGPT, generative AI, can hallucinate. It can say, and it's in a computer, and it says 2 + 2 is 5. So part of it is going to be all of us, including writers, becoming literate and saying, all right, if we do use one of these AI engines, don't believe it.
Yeah.
Why is that true? There are a lot of them show the references. You got to go to the references, especially in medicine. And there are some medical ones that I now use, but I never believe them. I just always go to the references. I use it as a way of getting to references.
I haven't even used it yet, as far as that.
Yeah.
As far as like for a medical thing.
But here's an encouraging note, and this has to do with social media. There is now a version of ChatGPT developed at Harvard's Public Health School that you can feed into it a peer-reviewed journal article, medical article, and it will in seconds send out a short, punchy piece of copy which an influencer can use as part of their broadcast so that they don't have to make things up or get it wrong. Mm-hmm. And the hallucination issue, of course, is a baseline one. So the fact that a school of public health has vetted this software in order to be that reliable, early days, but at least it's encouraging.
But remember, once you open it up to generative AI, it's the Wild Wild West, so it can suck in information that's wrong. That's the thing, difference between a closed system and an open system. There's also open evidence, which is another one, medical, and Perplexity does the same thing. It gives you references. So anyway, I think.
But it gets back to the question of like, how do you know something's good? You need an expert to look at it.
Right.
Right? I mean, I use AI to get started on stuff, but I'm also using 30 years of training to look at what it gave me. And so then the question becomes like, how do we make sure that experts who can catch that stuff are still very much central to whatever gets created, at small or very large scale?
And you have to really look carefully, right? I remember I texted something to a patient once, and I had one letter off. It totally changed the meaning of it in an embarrassing way. Didn't get me into trouble, but I'll tell you what it was. I said, you have acid reflux, and it read, you have the ass of reflux. And I was like, I died. And anyway, she never said anything.
It's a great title for a novel, The Ass of Reflux.
No, ever since then,
I need that.
But you see it, it's so beautiful, the font. So you have to really read it carefully, folks. And that new feature where you can edit something that you send within a minute or so, use that. Anyway, we have 1 minute left, and I would like to use that to have each one of you have a little bit of a sum up of what you'd like them to walk away with.
You go first.
Great.
You go first. We'll go to the end, and then we'll end up with Lisa.
I think that just, we take our responsibility. We know that we have a very powerful mode, and we take that responsibility to heart, and that there's always a little bit of learning to be done within the entertainment world. And, well, one big thing for Grey's Anatomy in particular, or all of the dramas that I will eventually work on, is that drama always comes first. That was one of the things that my first boss always told me. She was like, she came from the ER world, which ER was one of the first shows to use doctors as actual writers in the writer's room. instead of just, consulting from the outside. And she was like, I'm very keen on having everything accurate. I, came from this world, and we had the doctors, and we listened to the doctors, and the doctors are very important, but drama will always win. So just think about that when LVAD wires get cut.
Yeah, okay, all right, very dramatic. The red light is on, so very quickly, Marty, in like 15 seconds.
We've been talking about screenwriters being storytellers. You are storytellers. You are telling yourself the story of your life, your whole life long. You are incorporating events into that and changing the script as they have it. So everything that we've been talking about that occurs in scripted entertainment is also going on in here.
Okay,
Bring
so
us home, Lisa.
I'm always thinking from the child-parent perspective, and I just want to make the case for co-watching, right? Watching kids' stuff with them. It is very hard sometimes for kids to have an on-the-nose conversation like, how do you feel about this? It can be a lot easier to say, you know what that reminds me of? It reminds me of that episode when this happened. That then you can connect with your kid and your teenager if you are co-watching and can use these fictional stories to make the glue.
Thank you very much. Thank you, audience, for coming here, and thank you, panelists.